All right, everyone. Woohoo! Happy Saturday. Thank you so much for joining us today for Choose Women the Right Investment. We have such an amazing group of ladies here today, and we know some men are joining us, so we're not discriminating against anyone. And so today I want to first introduce myself. Most of you know who I am. I'm Wendy Diamond. I founded Women's Entrepreneurship Day in 2013 when only 1% of investment dollars went towards women founders. So I knew if we created a day in the world, we could change this. And as you see today, that's, oh my gosh, up to 2%. How ridiculous. We need to bring this up, ladies, and men. And so what I brought here today is some of the most fabulous ladies that I have ever met that are investing in women, and their lives are dedicated to it. So today I'm going to let them all kind of tell a little bit about themselves so we can get it going, and then we're going to get right into it. So first, let's start off with you, Arielle. Arielle is literally created 100,000K Incubator for women. So tell us all about it in a couple of minutes, Arielle.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Wendy. Super excited to be here. So I'm the founder of 100K Incubator, which is the first business funding mobile app for women. Specifically, we help women who are earning under $100,000 get access to capital for their businesses. One of the things I think is really unique about us is that we really cover the entire funding landscape. So we don't just deal in the equity space. We also help women access business loans, business lines of credit, as well as grants. And so for me, it's really just about making sure women know what their options are when it comes to getting capital and how they kind of take those early steps to actually scale and hit their first 100K.
Woohoo! All right, now we're going to go to Lisa Blau, who was one of the investors of Bumble. So all you single ladies and men, if you're on, you know about Bumble. They went public for over $7 billion. Lisa, tell us about your fund.
Thank you, Wendy. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here with Arielle and Alexandra talking with everyone today. So I'm a founding partner in Able Partners, and we are focused on investing in early stage consumer businesses in what we define as the positive living space. So we're looking for brands that are helping the consumer live a healthier, happier, more meaningful life. And some areas of focus for us are mental health and women's health, aging women's health, broadly wellness and nutrition, addiction, childcare, the care economy, infrastructure. All of those sectors are things that we're really excited about. We invest at the pre-seed, seed, and Series A stage, and sometimes opportunistically we like to grow with our portfolio, and we've invested at Series B and beyond. And in fact, now we have launched a SPAC, Able Brands Co. We are Goldman Sachs' first all-female-led SPAC sponsor team, and we see that as an opportunity to also bring more women into the SPAC space and help some of these brands mature into later stage capital needs. So that's a bit about us. We're invested in, as you said, Bumble, Goop, Daily Harvest, Spring Health, Compass Pathways, Bluestone Lane, a whole bunch of different great brands that are helping consumers live a healthier, happier life. And 75% of our portfolio have a woman on the founding team. That is an important criteria to us. My partner and I have been female founders ourselves, and we've been on the other side of the table. So that was a big motivator for us. And as you said, only 2% of venture dollars, I think, go to all female teams. I think 7% now go to, teams that have at least one woman, or I think it's 10% go to teams that have at least one woman founder. And only 7% of venture capitalists are women. So we need more women on both sides of the table.
Woohoo! All right, now Alexandra, who hasn't gotten, GlamSquad, thank you so much for that one, Alexandra. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing now in your fund and your background.
Sure. Well, totally agree with Lisa, who's an old friend, about needing more women on both sides of the table. I have been a serial entrepreneur, co-founder of Glit and GlamSquad, another business called Fits, and about a year ago partnered with a woman named Lisa Myers, who was a partner at L. Catterton, and we launched a growth equity fund called Clerisy, investing in consumer and techsumer companies. So These are businesses typically Series B, but depending on how the companies have been financed, not all of them necessarily have raised venture. So it could be first round of outside capital, could be as late as a Series C, maybe even Series D. We're looking at companies doing over 10 million in revenue that need capital to scale once they've found product market fit. So a lot of the categories that Lisa mentioned are also categories we love, such as health and wellness, food and beverage. We like beauty, but it has to be differentiated, could be with a patent or a molecule or some special technology or device. We're open to technologies that have a consumer angle integrated in fintech and consumerization of healthcare. And our first investment, since we're a new fund, so we don't have tons of investments from Clerisy, although I've done a lot of angel investing, our first investment is a company called Dormify, which is a mother-daughter founding team, which is really exciting. And so we've been quite involved in Dormify. And for any of you who have college-age kids, take a look.
Woo! All right, so let's get into it now. So, what do you guys look for? What is the criteria that you're looking for when you first meet an entrepreneur? And I'd love to hear a little bit more, the ways that you are getting approached by entrepreneurs as well, because I think what we're here, everybody is like, okay, we have this business. How do we get to you guys? And how do we find out? And what is your criteria in doing that? So let's start with you, Lisa. Give us a few of your tips on what you look for in founders. And also, how can they find you if they're not on here and they don't know about you? What is the way you're getting your deal flow?
Sure. I'll talk first a little bit about what we're looking for. Founders, I think this has been said before, it is so much about the founder and that founding team. So knowing that they have the passion and the drive and they will really run through walls to get this business off the ground and scale it. And I think to step back, a founder needs to ask themselves, is this a venture-backed business? Am I committed to doing this pretty much 24/7 for 5 to 10 years? High risk, high return potential, or is this a lifestyle business? And both are really respectable, very valid paths, but they require, different types of funding. So if we're going the venture path where you're really all in, I want to see tremendous passion. I want to see expertise. I want to see someone who's a tremendous problem solver and who also understands where their own shortcomings are and will build a really tremendous team around themselves. Not only the team internally, but also think thoughtfully about the cap table, the investors that they're bringing around them and how investors can help support them. And then obviously we're looking for, early KPIs, key performance indicators that would sort of signal to investors and others in the market that this business is hitting some key milestones, and could be signing a key customer, it could be a particular product launch, a big marketing event, and seeing those revenue numbers go up, would really be helpful. And obviously for us, it's a lot about sector focus. So we have tremendous focus in our areas of expertise. And so that sort of gets to your second question around how we source our deals. This is really, our sourcing engine has been built up over, a decade plus of being investors in the space. So I'd like to think that if someone's launching, a health and wellness business and they're looking for early dollars, they've heard of Able or will find us. So some of that is through networking with other investors, other founders who've worked with us, founders that we've spent time with, that we build relationships with, and then frankly, Wendy, it's doing things like this and making sure that we're reaching, founders who aren't necessarily in New York, San Francisco, or major cities where there's a lot of opportunity to network, although we've all been networking, over Zoom for the past year. And so I would just say to the women out there that it's important to kind of look through your own network, to read a lot, subscribe to all the various newsletters, really get to understand the various firms and funds and investors who invest in your space, and, be super informed about it. And, we respond to cold calls, emails or LinkedIn requests all the time. So those are also valid paths to finding a connection to an investor.
All right. Okay, let's go the opposite now. Now we got Arielle. So 100,000, how are you handling all these people? Like, how do they know about you and what you're doing and so forth? Because you're looking at, she's looking at KPIs, et cetera. Your people probably even, what I'm assuming that come into the incubator are at a earlier stage than that.
Absolutely. Typically, we really love to work with pre-seed and kind of seed, entrepreneurs. And we actually work on both sides. So it's businesses that could potentially be venture backed, but also, businesses that are more so in the lifestyle space. And so for us, first things first is we want to educate our founders about, again, all of their different capital options and kind of what different ones they should be looking at. And so specifically, we decided to kind of move our platform from a more traditional incubator, model, into actually being a mobile app. And so there have been various kind of iterations of that, like over, the course of the last couple of years. But as we move into this new version of the app, which will be launching in May, for us, we start with education, and then two, kind of based on the data that's being collected from, sales and conversion rates in terms of ads that they're running and, all other sorts of, different KPIs that we measure, we usually can make recommendations in terms of the type of capital that they should be going after. So we don't have like specific necessarily like industries, because again, we kind of are in both sides of, the venture backed versus like lifestyle businesses. But we are, very like kind of revenue, driven and like industry kind of sector driven in terms of the recommendations that we make in terms of the types of capital that they should be going after. So that's usually what we do.
And in regard, I would love to learn a little bit more about the grants. I mean, grants are like, you don't have to pay those back. I mean, people would be like dreaming of that when they're starting a new business. What is that ecosystem like, and how easy is it for women entrepreneurs to receive those?
To be honest, grants, I would say, aspect of the business has picked up, over the last, I'd say probably 18 months, right? And so I think between COVID, a lot of Black Lives Matter, all of those things have kind of spurred, I think, corporations to wake up to things that we've been asking for many years. And so as a result, I think it's more so about kind of aggregating those resources and then making recommendations kind of based on where our entrepreneurs are in terms of what they should actually be applying for. What we always say is that, hey, grants are great. And right now, everyone's in a very corporate giving mood. We hope to see that continue into the years, but we don't typically honestly tell entrepreneurs to bank on getting a grant because it is a very competitive application process. And so what we do, recommend is that, again, you look at all of your different capital options. And so look at the business loans, look at the business lines of credit, kind of see where your business is to even be able to qualify, for those things. Or if you potentially have to leverage your personal credit, and other more kind of personal oriented lines of capital, really understand kind of what that actually means for your personal finances and make those investments very strategically to be able to show that early traction so you can kind of move out of that space into the business lines of credit, into the business loans, into the government loans, et cetera. So we teach all kind of in that area. And then specifically, oftentimes we partner with a lot of venture firms, as well in terms of deal flow, because for us, it's really about getting these entrepreneurs even prepared for those of them who want to take that venture path to actually being ready for those conversations and ready to actually show the data that's needed to be able to close those deals. And so I think that a lot of women entrepreneurs that we encounter, everybody has heard of the Shark Tanks and the venture money and, all of those things, but they don't really have a deep understanding of like what's actually required to close those types of deals. And so for us, again, it really starts with education. And then from there, it's kind of moving people into those different pathways to get the capital that they need.
Right. So this is like exciting. All right. So now, Alexandra, let's talk about you. You've got a $100 million fund now with Clerisy. You have yourself been an entrepreneur at many amazing startups. Tell us a little bit what you look for when you're investing now with this new fund.
Sure. So one thing I didn't mention earlier is we really focus on a path to profitability or profitability. So we're, it's a little later stage than some pre-seed seed funds. We're ideally investing where business is at break even, or once we invest, we think they could get there within 12 to 18 months. That's really important to us. And I think that's somewhat differentiated in the venture space. And the last thing I want to see is entrepreneurs raising too much capital and then things go wrong, i.e. COVID happened. So many companies pivoted. Some ended up doing phenomenally well if they could figure out how to build or rejigger or refocus towards e-commerce, but a lot of businesses, obviously in hospitality and some other categories, really, had a tough time, had to furlough, had to lay off people, et cetera. So we care a lot about profitability. We're investing after businesses have found product market fit. So we're coming in after the stage of, oh, this is a great founder with a ton of potential. We want to see that potential in action. In some cases, we might help the founding team bring in external talent. Sometimes it's time to bring in those gray hairs, people with more experience who can help scale the business. Obviously, with the support of the founders, we're not trying to kind of bulldoze founders out of a situation. I think in most cases, you really want the founders to continue to be involved, but sometimes the visionary founder isn't always the same person who can scale the business to a major exit one day. So excited to roll up our sleeves. I should also say we always take a board seat and an observer seat, and our portfolio is fairly concentrated. So the plan is to have no more than 8 companies in this first fund. So when we do invest, our check size is a minimum of $5 million into a company, and we're all in. So we're on regular weekly calls with the company. I personally get really involved in areas like hiring and partnerships and marketing and areas like that, whereas Lisa's more involved in thinking through the financials and revenue streams, and if there's a real estate component, she's got a lot of real estate experience. So what's really fun of this investor operator duo that we have is that we really bring different skill sets and networks and experiences to the table, and we don't overlap that much in a good way.
Okay, so this is like really exciting. So everybody here, that is watching this has an opportunity, whether it's with Arielle and getting a grant or a loan, et cetera, and taking it all the way through Lisa and then Alexandra. Now, my question here is, I think, what was that pivotal moment when you're like, you know what? I am going to now create a fund and I'm going to start investing in women. So go back to at the beginning of it, when you were working on something and you said, wow, I really want to get into investing in women. What was that for you, Lisa? What was that one point? Because you were at CNN before this and all this stuff. What was it that made you decide, you know what, this is what I want to do now for the rest of my life?
Yeah, for me, it was after I had started a business called Vital Juice. That was a health and wellness digital media platform. And when we sold it, I said, this is what I'm doing. I really want to focus on investing in women, in the sectors that I know, which was broadly wellness. And I was initially geographically focused on, women in New York. It was sort of around 2008 when the financial crisis had happened. And I saw that a lot of smart, talented women, who had typically come to New York and maybe taken jobs in financial services or consulting, those jobs either weren't there or they were no longer appealing. And I really felt like this is the time to invest in the entrepreneurship economy in the city, and specifically for women. My partner and I had been women trying to raise money for a business, and we raised all that money from men. And I just thought it would be great to have more women on the other side of the table with a focus on really investing in this undervalued asset class, right? Like, I believe investing in women is not just good and paying it forward. It's actually very smart business because, time and time again, there's lots of different studies we could cite that women outperform men, and having women on the team actually impacts, outcomes and success outcomes. And, we see that in our portfolio, but that's really what brought me into the work, a little over a decade ago.
All right. Now, Arielle, what was that pivotal moment for you?
Oh my goodness. Honestly, it was just seeing a gap. I felt like in the marketplace when it came to funding women entrepreneurs who were earning under 100K. And specifically, again, like in both sides, in that lifestyle side as well as in that venture side. And so if we're being frank and we're talking about the data, especially when it comes to, women of color and kind of what our average kind of revenue is, typically when it comes to businesses being in that kind of $24,000 to $28,000 per year in revenue, right? And so if we're talking about really getting capital, to a diverse amount of women, I think that there has to be more funds that are focused, in that area where a lot of these businesses are kind of at. And so for us, we saw that as a huge opportunity. We were like, what does it look like to get capital in many different ways, to these entrepreneurs who are, kind of really still in that very early stage of their businesses, and they're earning under $100,000. And what does that look like to help them scale, to their first 100K, to their first million and beyond, and then to pass them off, to, other incredible funds that are doing work at that higher level. But for us, we really wanted to kind of focus specifically, in this kind of area and in this kind of income range, because that's where we really feel like we can make, the most amount of social impact.
All right, so but Arielle, what was that point where did you start your own business and you couldn't find the money, or what made you start this? I mean, we're talking about you.
Well, for me personally, it's just the passion. So yes, I am a founder, I've had businesses, definitely, before that. And to be honest, just like the process of, again, getting access to capital and understanding what all the options were, even as someone who went to business school and, all of those things, I was like, wait, I don't quite understand like what are actually all of my options. And so it was also a personal journey. But I will say that, the majority of, my career, I've always worked with women entrepreneurs. I've been on the consulting side, specifically in scaling startups, doing a lot of marketing work, digital work, et cetera. And just through when you're working with startups, the teams are so intimate. And so you get to know a lot of the different areas, of the business, and capital is just always an issue, even for businesses that are, quote unquote, healthy, right? It's like scaling to that next level always requires capital. So where is that capital actually going to come from? And so for me, that's, I would probably say what planted the seed. And then from there, as I continue to do my research and to study and to become more hands-on in that more finance side of the business, that's when I'd say I started the incubator and really started doing this work.
Okay, fantastic. Now, Alexandra, what was, at GlamSquad, was it Gil? What was it that made you all of a sudden say, you know what, I'm going to start a fund?
Yeah, I mean, I since my since my Gilt days, we started Gilt 2007, I kind of thought I would end up in investing at some point. So that was always top of mind as I'd say last few decades of my career. And with each operating change that I made, going from Gilt and then GlamSquad and then other businesses. And then I went to corporate America. I was at Allergan for 2.5 years, which was actually an awesome experience. With each operational role, I felt like there was still more for me to learn from building a team, managing a P&L, et cetera. So in summer of 2019, I had been at Allergan. It got announced it was getting acquired for $63 billion. And once that was announced, a number of different headhunters started calling me for different investing opportunities. And I thought, okay, now is the time. And I actually reached out to Lisa Myers, my now partner, for some advice and some guidance. She was someone who had been a friend and a professional friend. And I really respected her and her career. And anyway, we immediately caught up, and she confided in me that she wanted to start a fund. And that was, I wish I could say like, oh, aha moment, boom, voila, and here's $100 million. But unfortunately, it takes a really long time to build a fund, and starting a fund with anyone, even more so than a startup company, it's really a long-term thing, because, it can take several years for the startups to have their exit. It's really, and it's like a marriage when you start a fund with someone. So we had many conversations about how we wanted to structure things, what it would be like to work together. But I would say from, I often live with my gut instinct. I kind of knew immediately like this is going to happen, but it definitely took time. And then COVID started, and I'll tell you, raising a fund over Zoom, is different. There's some pros and cons, because you can be very efficient with your time, but sometimes meeting someone in person and building a real live relationship with prospective investors, founders, et cetera, is pretty special. And Zoom is pretty good. I think even in a non-COVID world, I think a lot of us will probably still use Zoom for efficiency, but nothing replaces in-person contact.
Okay, so now like going into where we are in the future, right? Like as we're seeing this now, like women and minorities have been the most affected during COVID, right? And during this pandemic, how do we see, how do each of you really feel about what's the future for women entrepreneurs? Is it a certain space? Is it a certain like initiative that you feel that you're most passionate about? I'd love to hear that. Lisa, do you want to?
Sure. Look, I think the future is hopefully quite bright. There's a lot of opportunity, and I think the silver lining of COVID broadly, seeing how women and minorities were impacted, and seeing 2 million women leave the workforce, during COVID from sort of a lack of a care infrastructure and all the related challenges. I think we can no longer ignore this. So there's innovation, both public and private dollars coming at this. And I'm hopeful that over the next 5 to 10 years, we'll see a lot of great innovation come to support women broadly, to be active, contributing, members of our economy. More specifically on women as entrepreneurs and innovation. I mean, look, the categories that I invest in, women are making 80% of the purchasing decisions. So of course it makes perfect sense for women to be the innovators in those categories because they're making all those decisions. And so, I really like to see women founders in these consumer spaces because I think they bring a lot of intuitive understanding and empathy for what the consumer needs. So I really do think there's a lot of opportunity, and particularly in wellness, right? I mean, COVID has really made our health, our nutrition, making nutritious food accessible, fitness, and just this culture of well-being, a priority for a lot of people. So I think we'll continue to see a lot of innovation there. And mental health, we saw tremendous activity across that sector because unfortunately, people were really hurting, and it is now also a silver lining of COVID, something that, employers and as a society, we can't ignore. And we see women coming in and innovating there as well. And then, of course, the care economy infrastructure, as I said.
And what is your favorite investment that you're in that you just recently have done during COVID? And what made you invest in that company?
Oh, it's so hard to choose one. During COVID, we really focused, if it's limited to during COVID, we really focused on mental health because there was so much innovation there. And we invested in a business called Ellipsis. It's not particularly consumer facing, but it uses sort of audio and voice to analyze and make predictions about someone's mental state to sort of further bolster and support the program that they're getting from their care team. And I think there's a lot of really exciting innovation in mental health in that space. So that would be, kind of my favorite during COVID. And then more broadly, of course, we love our businesses like Bumble and Goop, and Daily Harvest is a business that, has done quite well during COVID and is a favorite investment of mine. She was raising money when she was 8 months pregnant, and, that's not easy to do. I think, probably some women on this call have been in that position, and it's really challenging. And Rachel is a tremendous entrepreneur, and she's got a great consumer product that really resonates, and it certainly resonated during COVID. So we're very proud of her.
All right. Next, Arielle, what is your favorite investment that has come through 100K?
Oh my goodness, I'd have to say the Braid Releaser. And so mother-daughter founding team. Angela Green is the mom back in, I want to say 1992. She basically established a tool that helps, women take their braids down. And she developed the prototype, but, due to just not having the support, having to support 3 children, et cetera, she kind of shelved the idea. Well, 27 years later, her daughter, Sarah Green, ends up with, an engineering degree, MBA, et cetera, and says, I'm going to pick this project back up. And so she decided to enter our incubator. And we helped her, raise almost about $40,000 in capital. So it's about $20,000 that came from kind of an angel investor in a pitch competition, and then another kind of $20,000 through crowdfunding. And specifically, the reason why I love that story so much was that it actually happened during COVID. And so at first, we launched the campaign kind of right before the world started to shut down, and we had to close that campaign down. And there was a lot of tears and frustration, on Sarah's part, feeling like, I worked so hard to get to this point to launch this. And, the world shutting down, we don't know what's going on. Am I ever going to get this off the ground? It turned out to be a real blessing in disguise, after I'd say probably the first couple of months, when the media finally start to talk about other things, other, than COVID. Her story started to, go viral, got posted by, Viola Davis, also ended up in a ton of different press outlets from, ABC7 to Essence. And then, basically she ended up winning a pitch competition, getting an angel investor, pretty early and a bunch of other things, and also getting her pre-sales up on the second crowdfunding campaign that we ended up launching on a much, I'd say, better platform called Fund Black Founders. And so for us, just seeing one, Sarah's resilience, and also just seeing her mother's dream, that's been happening for almost 3 decades, actually come into fruition during COVID, that was so meaningful for us. And so we're really excited just to see how they continue to grow and how they continue to expand, as we continue to kind of move, hopefully, out of this pandemic.
All right. Congratulations on that. So next, Alexandra, now you said you just invested in one company. Why don't you also, if you invested in an angel round of another company during this time, what would that be and what was your favorite one?
Yeah, well, I still would say Dormify. And there are many reasons. One, I've actually known the mother and the daughter for about 10 years now. And remember when Dormify was an idea that came from the pain point of a mother taking her daughter, the daughter's now 30, but taking her daughter to college and realizing that there weren't that many options at a relatively affordable price point that also had a cute aesthetic. And some of you may remember some colleges require a strange size for bedding, twin XL, which is not really a mainstream size for bedding. And so that's where the idea was born. And, it's been amazing to see how the company has been built and has grown. And you'd think that they would have had a tough year of COVID, given that most kids didn't go to college. A lot of college was from home, but I think they actually ended up having a great year. And a lot of that was maybe because Gen Z consumers, so starting from, let's say, age 14 to early 20s, they wanted to redecorate their spaces, not just a college dorm, but could be their bedrooms at home. Maybe their bedrooms felt a little babyish before, or if they were cooped up in their rooms. And many of them are very into social media like TikTok. They wanted to change things up in their rooms, in their small spaces. And for a lot of Gen Zers, we have learned that they think of their expression of their space just like many of us. I'm a Gen Xer. Many of us think about fashion. And so we're really excited to help grow and build and support the business. And it's been a lot of fun to see a mother-daughter team. The mother is more, she's the chairman, so the daughter's more in the everyday weeds, and it's great. And I actually had written a Forbes 30 under 30 recommendation for the daughter, Amanda Zuckerman, years ago. So she's terrific.
Wow. And so when you guys think about like these entrepreneurs, what about their team? Are you guys helping them when you invest in them? I'm assuming, you've met the whole team. What are your suggestions on an entrepreneur when they're building, out their company and bringing in the people? What are your tips on creating the best team before you invest? Lisa, do you want to start with that?
Sure. I really think it's about finding people who have the right skill sets, who can complement the founder, and using your networks to bring in, great team players. So obviously skills and expertise within the category and the specific function is critical, but also making sure that there's real cultural fit, that everyone's aligned, is really critical, because you could have a, genius growth marketer, but, if that person doesn't sort of gel with the rest of your team, it could be really problematic. And I think it's important for these fast growing early stage businesses that are sort of scaling from maybe where I am to try to get to where Alexandra is, to think about culture. I do think some of the sort of EQ challenges can come into play, and it certainly plays an important role in your fundraising process, right? And having a team that can be really supportive of a founder in all those investor conversations is also quite critical.
Where would you say, when you guys are answering these questions, like where would you say for people to find the team and where they could find their technical co-founder, let's say, or whatever that might be?
I mean, we always try to support our companies when they're trying to, to hire. And so we reach out far and wide in our network, right? It's sending emails, it's posting to LinkedIn, it's posting to all of your various social handles, and trying to tap into any existing networks that you might have, right? Whether, I'm guessing Arielle has a great list, and, any schools that you attended, trying to have the job posting distributed amongst those alumni groups, really trying to find existing networks, that share these types of opportunities out, and, asking all your friends, families, former coworkers, do you know someone who has this skill set? This is what we're looking for. Hiring is really, it's a critical function, and it's sort of a full-time job, and you really need to be on it. And so to the extent that you already have some investors around you, really leaning on them to help, add some additional firepower to your search.
Perfect. Does anybody else, Arielle, Alexandra, anything to contribute to that question?
I would say, focusing specifically, on both marketing as well as kind of finance and accounting. Those are usually like the two areas that we really push founders to make sure that they have a person, and even if it's just on a part-time, basis. One, the growth marketing side obviously is to continue to scale the business and show proof of concept. And then the finance and accounting side is just to stay organized, because part of the process of accessing capital is to have your books, in order. And so that, for us is super important. It's something that we help them focus on.
Cool. Alexandra, did you have something?
Yeah, I fully agree with everything Lisa said, as well as Arielle. And I would just add to that cultural comment, because sometimes I think people in the business world maybe think when you use the word culture that it's fluffy stuff and it's, the softer skills and not as important. And it's so important to get culture right. And if you have a person in an organization that has a real negativity or is toxic, that can be poison in a startup culture of any size, whether it's a small company or a large company. And the damage that can happen as a result of, this kind of employee that maybe just, spreads whatever it is. We're working too hard. The benefits aren't there. We're not getting compensated. Whatever the complaint could be. And in many startups, people are overworked and underpaid on a cash comp, perspective. A lot of people in startups are really hoping that equity is meaningful one day. It's really dangerous. So, and I've learned as an operator, and I've now learned also as an investor and as advisor to companies, is to make changes. And often those types of situations don't really get better until you kind of put an end to something like that. And I'm a big fan of coaching as well. So especially when you have first-time founders who maybe don't have experience scaling a team, a business, managing lots of people. I've brought in executive coaches over the years, and I find them super helpful if everyone can kind of embrace, let's do this together, whether you use a framework like Myers-Briggs or a different one. I think they can actually be really helpful if everyone's committed to, having a kumbaya moment together and being really honest with one another.
Okay, this is like my fun question, because I always, we're all entrepreneurs, right? Every one of us who created a fund or whatever we're doing, right? Let's go, first let's do you, Lisa. What is your dream? Let's say in 10 years from now, what is the dream you want with Able or whatever you want to do in life?
Well, let's see. For Able, I hope that many of our portfolio companies, have had successful exits and are still thriving, happy, well-capitalized businesses. And I think, as I said at the top of the call, we're launching a SPAC, and to me, that's just representative of constantly evolving with our sector, with our entrepreneurs, with our companies. And so for me personally, it's very rewarding because, it's an entirely sort of new opportunity. So I'm excited by that of being able to use some evergreen capital to continuously grow and evolve our business with the sector and our entrepreneurs. And, you know, I hope that we can continue to support women who are, you know, raising money and launching smart businesses, and diverse founders. And these areas, you know, what we refer to at Able, where the consumer has historically been stigmatized, like mental health, addiction, care, all those related issues. You know, I get very excited by the potential from some of these innovations coming to those consumers, in creating relief and opportunity. So I hope we're still around and we're evolving and we're doing bigger and better things and helping more people.
Woohoo! All right, Arielle, tell us what you're going to be doing in 10 years from now. What is your dream project?
Well, I mean, the dream, I would say, for us is to, you know, help women entrepreneurs in this early stage, you know, access over $1 billion in capital. So in 10 years, if we can say that we were part of that process, you know, collectively from our women entrepreneurs, we would be super excited about that. In terms of the way that we see, you know, the company evolving, I mean, right now we're very focused on, you know, just getting our mobile app, you know, kind of the best software and the best kind of data-driven, you know, technology to help different funders, you know, whether they be, you know, private banking institutions or, you know, just different kind of angel and VC firms, you know, make, you know, better funding decisions. And so we're excited about that tech growth. And then we're also in the process of setting up our own internal fund, because that's always been, you know, definitely a goal of mine. So I would say between, you know, the fund, the tech, and then just overall just helping, you know, early stage women entrepreneurs access, you know, over $1 billion in capital over the next 10 years, that would feel really great for us.
Woohoo! Okay, now Alexandra, tell us about your fund and what is your dream in 10 years? Are you going to go back to being an entrepreneur, or are you going to continue? Is your dream to continue with the fund?
Well, I honestly think starting a fund is even more entrepreneurial than starting a company, which I didn't know that before. But I think my dream is pretty similar to both Lisa and Arielle's. I mean, I would hope that, so in our case, I hope we'd be on our third or fourth Clerisy fund. I hope that because we invest later stage than they do, our hold period we're expecting would be 3 to 5 years. So I hope we would have had a number of exits. And I hope that a lot of those entrepreneurs that have had exits are also reinvesting capital to support other women. And it, you know, it really is an ecosystem. And I hope in 10 years, we don't have to be having the same conversation of let's support women in diversity. I hope it's just obvious and not something that has to be such a kind of conscious effort or ESG from more institutional investors who are trying to do good and don't really know where to begin. I hope it's just happening and it's mainstream at that point.
Okay, so now we're going to go break out. So what I would love is if everyone could just go in a room and you could just, if they can ask you questions.
Start building like a stable foundation, you know, as an entrepreneur.
Well, so first I'm going to tell you to find me on Instagram and go and apply for this program that I just launched with Target. So specifically, they're looking to help 100 Black women entrepreneurs who are in this kind of retail kind of product driven business space, kind of scale their e-commerce businesses in addition to get onto mass retail shelves. And they've completely sponsored the program. It's free. And there's going to be a lot of kind of capital resources and partners, you know, that we're bringing in to kind of help you with these very things. So that's number one. Go to my Instagram and find that link and apply. Number two, what I would probably say, you know, so specifically, are you asking about like how do you get access to capital or kind of?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. How do I get access to capital, and how do I begin like building that network when, you know, I haven't, you know, those resources aren't available to me and I don't have those people around me that have done this before. So, you know, it's very difficult when you're starting something or you've started something and it's like starting from scratch. You know, it's a lot of trial and error with things. So I'm also seeking like that mentorship as well.
Yeah, and I definitely I get it. I can relate. You know, I was the first entrepreneur, you know, kind of as well, you know, in my immediate family, and so this was very foreign to people. But what I will say is that there are mentors out there and there are resources out there. And so I think doing what you're even currently doing now, showing up to events like this that Wendy is putting on, reaching out to, different speakers and different people that you're meeting, joining programs, joining incubators, joining accelerators, because that's going to put you in touch with the people who can help provide you with those resources. Specifically, though, if we're going to talk about, capital, I think first is one, taking a look at how much capital is it that you actually need to raise, and then also taking a look at how much money are you currently generating in your business to be able to support that capital. And so for us in 100K Incubator, the way that we kind of break women entrepreneurs into different levels and tell them kind of what they might qualify for in terms of different types of capital is based off of revenue. And so if you're earning under, let's say, $3,000, per month in your business, we would put you in level 1. That means that you're probably going to need more personal kind of credit, driven capital, just because you don't really have strong proof of concept yet in terms of sales in the business. So that might be, a business credit card you might be able to get approved for. It might be a personal loan. It might be a home equity line of credit if you own property and you want to leverage some of that equity, out. If you're earning over $3,000 per month in your business, we put you in level 2. And so that's when you can usually start to qualify, for business loans, business lines of credit, and things that are more supported and driven specifically by the business, government, business loans, et cetera. And then level 3 is usually when you're earning kind of 100K per year or $9,000 per month. And if you're at that level 3, that's when we're like, okay, if you want to really start talking to angel investors, and, potentially depending on the scalability of your business, even talking to VCs, maybe for a longer term plan, then we can say, okay, that's when you should probably start to have, that conversation. So I think understanding where you're at revenue wise and kind of what category you fall in, like that's going to be very helpful. And then 2, kind of what I said before, is just being, applying to different incubator, accelerator programs, and just making sure that you stay in the room of events like this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Hearing about that, Naz, I think that is like a great opportunity. And going back to the mentorship thing, I think that is super important. And I'd love to quickly ask Lisa, Alexandra, and Arielle, did you guys have a mentor that was behind you at the beginning of your journey?
I'll just jump in quickly. For me, I had a couple of really great bosses, but I would say my mentors were really more my co-founders. In the business that I had started and sold before I started to invest, I had a phenomenal co-founder, a woman who Alexandra also knows, who I'd gone to college and to business school with. And, having that partner as a support system who complements your skill set and who can, help you think through challenges, and just someone to be going through it with. And I also have a tremendous partner in Able in my fund. So, for me, those women have been my mentors, and they've also been my partners, and it's been really helpful. So if there's someone, Naz, in your life that, if it makes sense, it's also personal depending on the business. But if you have a business partner, it can sometimes be quite good. It can also not go well. So, proceed with caution.
That's something I've learned along the way. You definitely have to be mindful of who you partner with, because, business, especially if you want to build something long term, you have to get along with your partners and your team, and you guys have to have similar values, similar wants, and similar goals. So that's something I've learned along the way, and a lot of the people that have helped me build my business is friends. People that do have common interests and common goals and have the same values as me. So, I work with them and they help me, build my brand or help me promote my brand. But it's still, we're still in the beginning stages, and it's still, it's still new to us all, because we all haven't had anyone in our lives that has taken this path. So I definitely agree with that. And thank you for that.
Alexandra, who was your mentor?
I think mentors for me have evolved over the years. I would also say that I think of 3 different buckets. I think of role models, I think of mentors, and I think of sponsors. And a role model might be someone you've actually never met, but you look up to them and you might have aspirations to do things similarly to them, or, I think it's really important to dream big. So I've definitely had many role models in my life, and those role models change and evolve. Mentors, I think, are people who take the time to teach you things. And I've actually learned a ton from people that I've been mentoring, but they've, so in theory, they were my mentees, but they, I think, taught me more than I taught them. So I'm really bullish on that. And then there could be sponsors that you might not even have a great relationship with, but they're fighting for you. They could be an investor, it could be a board member, it could be a boss, or your boss's boss. You don't even know sometimes who those sponsors are, but those are the people that are really accelerating your career behind the scenes sometimes. So ideally, you can have all of those. Sometimes it might be one person might be 2 or even 3 of those categorizations, but often they're different people. And I would say also, I think incorrectly early in my career, I assumed all my mentors and role models and sponsors had to be women, and that's totally wrong. It's important to have men in your camp rooting for you, just as important to have men in there as women. So cast a wide net.
Agree. Hey, so Arielle, tell us, who is your mentor?
First of all, I love the way that Alexandra broke that down into 3 different categories, because I definitely have those, as well. I would say, in terms of mentorship, I would probably say that, right now, Dr. Anna Etienne, who runs an accelerator at Florida International University, has been an incredible mentor for me, just in terms of kind of navigating this process of building an incubator, even though mine is more, tech driven, kind of just breaking down, like, how do you, form partnerships, with, different corporations, how do you kind of manage deal flow? How do you select your founders, and how do you position your founders to be able to get access to the capital and the scaling opportunities that they need to? And so she's been a tremendous asset for me in terms of a really hands-on mentor. I also have sponsors, though. I have sponsors specifically that exist in a lot of the corporations that we do sponsorship deals with. And so those are usually just, kind of senior level executives who we've, connected. They've just taken a real kind of passion and liking to, what we're doing. They really believe in, the company and the mission. And as a result, they've opened tremendous, doors, for us to be able to get the support that we need to continue to grow. So I would say for me, like, sponsorship and mentorship are important. But what I would also add to that is that I've done a lot of cross networking with my peers. And so my peers, actually, if we're talking about the span of my career, have opened more doors for me than necessarily a mentor is. And so sometimes it's not necessarily looking up, it's like looking around and seeing, like, who's kind of next to you, and how can you all kind of, as you're growing and trying to figure out how to get access to capital and trying to figure out how to grow your companies, how can you help each other? How can you share resources, share, network, make introductions for each other? That's also been tremendously helpful as well.
I 100% agree, because it's like, if you don't ask, what's the worst that could happen? No, right? And so reach for the stars and ask everyone, right? If you need help, it's about looking at around you as well. All right, cool. Hey, Catherine, did you have a question?
Yeah, I had a general question about the startup landscape for anyone who wants to answer it. I guess in the past, it feels like most of the startups are concentrated in San Francisco, New York, Boston. How do you see that changing post-COVID? And do you still think there's as much value being located in one of those hubs, both as a startup and as a fund? Or do you see that evolving in how different startups connect to funds?
So I'm actually based in Miami, and I would say that not being in one of those cities has been an asset for us. And so specifically, as we're actually in the process of setting up our fund, that process got accelerated, because I wasn't planning to do that for another couple of years, but through, again, the pushing of my mentor and just talking to people who are down here, there really isn't kind of a Black woman-led, venture fund in Florida. And as a result, especially last year when a lot of the things, happened with COVID and BLM, and all these corporations locally, like their local offices, were looking to give money, they couldn't find anyone. And had we been set up, we would have probably been able to get access to, more capital than we did. And so sometimes, it's actually an asset to be outside of those New York, San Francisco, areas, because I think that there are a lot of, private investors, in addition to institutional investors, who are looking to actually grow locally. So for me, I think it's an asset, and we're happy to be in Florida.
Lisa?
It's really
Yeah, look, I'm in New York. One of my partners is in San Francisco. That's still where a bulk of the, venture funds are. Obviously, the last year has really, we've made investments just meeting people over Zoom. It's the first time we've made an investment without meeting people in person, and that's true of many funds. And I think we've all read about all the movement, happening in migration from California to Austin and from New York to Miami. So Arielle is not alone down there. And, I know Alexandra is down in Florida now too. So, I would generally say, yes, sure. I think there's opportunity to connect with people over Zoom. I still think it's really important to, to actively cultivate your network. You probably need to, have some opportunities to be in person, and surround yourself with these people in these communities. And I also think you just need to give some thought to recruiting and, how you build your team. I know a lot of our companies, had to hire throughout COVID, and people were remote and far flung, and, it's okay for a certain period of time, but it's hard to scale that way. So it's another consideration.
Cool. Alexandra?
Yeah, no, nothing special or additional to add. I agree.
Cool. Thank you, Catherine. All right, everyone. It's 3:00. Celebrate Saturday. Thank you so much for your time, everyone. Thank you for inspiring everyone, and grateful. And everyone connect. You've got their names. You can get on LinkedIn. You can Google them and find them and tell them that you saw them here. Thank you, everyone. Woohoo!
Bye.